After playing through Ocarina of Time, I can say that the consensus of this being one of the greatest games of all time may be true. However, that doesn't mean I didn't notice a few things that definitely could have been better with just a few minor changes. The gripes I'm going to quickly cover are in order of their inconvenience to the player: travel time, grotto placement, story, item progression / backtracking, and enemy placement. While majority of these are minor, I still think after hearing my thoughts, you will think that they are warranted. First off, the travel time. While Hyrule Field is nothing for veterans of modern open world games, running across the expanse of Hyrule Field, specifically as Child Link without Epona, can get pretty time consuming, with the distance from Castletown to Hylia being 45 seconds backwalking. While this issue does get solved somewhat with the warp songs later on, usually by the time we get them, it's too little too late because we already had Epona anyway, which could help us get across the field faster, and with Adult Link, it's just not really that big of a problem. Next is the grotto placement. Many of the grottos are very out of the way and feel placed at complete random. While I understand this was most likely due to wanting to make utilization of the, at the time of release, new Rumble feature, making grottos this randomly placed was not the move, especially when many grottos hold extremely important items for game progression. And now we can start to get into the chunky complaints I have, the first being story. Many of this game's plot points felt paced weird and randomly placed. To explain, let me recount how my early game transpired. As soon as I started the game up, it was as though there was no intro or objective given to me. So, since I've seen at least a little bit of the game played before, I decided to head to Castletown. Once I made it, I headed to the castle grounds to start Malon's story questline. She said she was going to give me a chicken to awaken Talon and gave me Kojiro. So, being the innocent OOT baby that I am, I headed over to Talon to attempt to utilize this bird. However, when I got there, it turns out I had the wrong bird. This at first confused me, but it didn't for long because only around 15 hours later, I finally found the weird egg, which hatched the correct chicken, helping me complete Malon's questline. Which brings me to my point. It felt a little lackluster that the narrative reward for this type of quest was just Talon running off for comic relief and a slight conversation with some girl in the garden for some rupees. Especially since the questline was given and completed in the short time frame of 15 hours, we didn't even get to know the characters well enough for these scenes to be impactful. Another failure in this regard was the foreshadowing of the sacred stones we see from the pedestal inside of the Temple of Time. For these stones to be so important that they have their own pedestals seems so interesting, but the stones I found throughout the game didn't give me any more insight and usually were just in a non-important location that didn't have much story impact. Imagine this. You've entered the Forest Temple. You make it all the way to the end. Then right as you are about to face the boss, you remember you forgot to get the Forest Temple boss key at the backside of the carpenter's tent. While I asked you all to imagine, I didn't have to, and this is why this is the item progression and backtracking section of the video. This required item is in another castle dilemma, not only plagued me in the Forest Temple, but in many other areas as well, leading me to take on the Herculean task of completing the bottom of the well and Shadow Temple, both without the Lens of Truth, because for some reason it was located inside the Spirit Temple, making both of these dungeons not necessarily hard, but very awkward, and that is what fixing some of the progression would do, make the game less awkward and more forward. And the most glaring issue in this entire game was the enemy placement. No matter where I went, it seemed as though they just decided to throw every single enemy at me for no reason whatsoever. I'm not saying that they didn't know how to design their game, but why was there Dark Link in Jabu Jabu's belly? Just quite frankly, that doesn't seem fitting for the setting, and I think if they put a little more care into the places they put their enemies, everything would have been perfect. Like a pea hat and a nice guy in this room, that's just kind of insane, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know why they did that. And that was a critique, well, a random critique of Ocarina of Time. If this video makes you feel like playing tennis with Ganon, you know what to do.